Bike geometry charts and figuring out why you might be a 54 in one brand but a 56 in another can seem confusing. So we're going to break this down into 4 important categories to help you understand how a bike fits and feels just by looking at its geometry chart. Number 1, stack. Stack is basically how low you can get your handlebars. It's the vertical measurement from the top of the head tube down to the imaginary horizontal line from the bottom bracket. I know that sounds confusing, but all you really need to know is that it determines how high up you're going to be sitting on the bike if you have the stem as low as it can possibly go, like on the felt behind me. You can increase the stack on most bikes by adding spacers, like on this BMC, so long as the fork steerer tube hasn't been cut down too low. So you can see we've added about all the spacers we would be able to on this BMC and have the handlebars about as high as we can get them. But remember, the stack measurement on a geometry chart is for the lowest position possible. Number 2, reach. Reach is basically how long the bike will feel. It's the horizontal measurement from the top of the head tube to the imaginary vertical line from the bottom bracket. Again, confusing. But it's basically just the length from where your handlebars would be if you had no stem back to the area above the bottom bracket. So reach is really affected by your stem length, because the reach measurement on a geometry chart assumes there's no stem on the bike and is just measuring the frame. Stack and reach are by far the most important measurements when deciding how a bike will fit. And you can easily look up your current bike's stack and reach online as long as you know the make, model, and the approximate year of it. Number 3, angles. We're specifically talking about the head tube and the seat tube angles. A smaller number is generally referred to as slacker, and this is going to make the bike feel more stable on long straight roads or fast descents, but it's going to make it feel a little bit less snappier around tight corners. So if you want a super quick handling race bike, you'll generally prefer a bike with steeper angles. But if you're looking at gravel bikes, you'll notice that those angles are usually slacker to provide more confidence going down rough terrain. Number 4, wheelbase. Pretty much the same thing we talked about with angles applies to the wheelbase. The shorter the wheelbase, the more snappier the bike is going to feel, and the longer the wheelbase, the more stable it's going to feel in a straight line. So in general, race bikes are going to have a lower stack, longer reach, steeper angles, and a shorter wheelbase than modern comfort bikes. And those comfort bikes are going to have a lower stack, longer reach, steeper angles, and shorter wheelbase than a gravel bike. Notice that I didn't mention the listed size as one of the major components of figuring out if a bike is going to fit, and that's because bike sizes are no longer standardized. Back in the day, bike size was just the length of the top tube. So if you were on a 54, the length of the top tube was 54 centimeters. A 56, it was 56 centimeters. But then Giant came out with their TCR and sloping top tubes, yada yada, and brands realized that they had a lot more freedom in designing bikes if they labeled sizing based on who a 54 would traditionally fit instead of it actually measuring the same as a traditional 54. So now brands can have 3 different styled bikes designed to fit the same person, but each bike have its own handling characteristics. And that's where we see a brand like Specialized having their modern race tarmac, and then a more comfort endurance Roubaix, and then even a gravel Crux. All can be labeled 54s, but they're going to have very different stack reach, angles, and wheelbases between the models. So if you're shopping for your first new bike in quite a long time, you might actually find you need a different size than you're currently riding. In the past 10 years or so, bikes have become less and less aggressive. And what that means is that in general, the stacks have become higher. So these head tubes have become higher. And or the reaches have become shorter to put riders in a more upright position. So that means if you're like me and have traditionally ridden size 56 bikes for most of your life, you may find that you have to go down a size to get a similar fit to your old bike. And that's exactly what I had to do with the felt behind me. Because a felt 56 has a much higher stack than an older Cervelo 56. So I had to go down a size and put an aftermarket very long stem on it and slide the aero bars about as far out as they could go to have a similarly feeling bike to my old 56 on a 54. So if you go online and find your old bike's geometry chart, you can get a really good idea of what any new bikes are going to feel like or fit like compared to the bike you currently have.